In the heart of the British monarchy lies a phrase whispered behind gilded doors: an heir and a spare. For centuries, the crown has celebrated the one destined to inherit, when another has been quietly moulded to remain in the shadows. A role marked by subtle neglect and unspoken expectation. In grand palaces and sombre drawing rooms, a life begins not with promise of glory, but with the heavy burden of being the backup, the forgotten second choice. Imagine a childhood filled with lavish surroundings, yet echoing with loneliness. At Glamis Castle, a baby girl is born into royalty, her destiny quietly sealed as the spare to the future queen. Educated in isolation by governesses, her every moment is dictated by unyielding duty. A stark contrast to the public adoration lavished upon her elder sister. Now picture another, born with a similar label, yet in a modern era where every whispered remark is captured and broadcast. From his earliest days, Prince Harry hears the familiar refrain, "He is William's backup." Implicit in every smile, every word is the shadow of an older brother who must shine. Archival footage and whispered family anecdotes paint a picture of a boy growing up under the relentless glare of media scrutiny and public expectation. Forever the secondary son in a world obsessed with the heir. Two lives, two eras, one unyielding truth. Today we peel back the layers of conditioning and expectation that have defined these lives. As we journey into the origins of these troubled spares, ask yourself, what cost does a life lived in the shadows really demand? And more chillingly, can the spark of defiance ever overcome a destiny so deeply cast in gloom? Princess Margaret was born on August 21st, 1930, at Glamis Castle in Scotland, the ancestral home of her mother's family. At the time of her birth, her father, Albert the Duke of York, was the second son of King George V, and thus far removed from the throne. The Yorks were a close-knit, laid-back family of four who enjoyed a life largely free from the pressures of royal duty. They lived quietly in the countryside, surrounded by horses and dogs, embodying a sense of normalcy that was rare for royals. Albert, affectionately known as Bertie, had no expectation of becoming king, and his daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, were raised in an environment that prioritized familial warmth over royal protocol. However, their peaceful existence was shattered in 1936 when King Edward VIII abdicated to marry Wallis Simpson.
A few hours ago, I discharged my last duty as King and Emperor. And now that I have been succeeded by my brother, the Duke of York, my first words must be to declare my allegiance to him. This I do with all my heart.
Suddenly and unexpectedly, Bertie became King George VI. Elizabeth was thrust into the role of heir presumptive, and Margaret's position shifted to that of the spare. The transition was abrupt and overwhelming for the family. Bertie, unprepared for kingship, struggled with the weight of his new responsibilities. As for Elizabeth and Margaret, the change meant an end to their carefree childhood. The quiet life they had known was now replaced with public scrutiny and institutional expectations. Disparities between the sisters became evident almost immediately. Elizabeth's education was tailored to prepare her for her future as queen. She received rigorous tutoring in history, law, and statecraft from some of Britain's finest minds, in Oxford and Cambridge universities. While Margaret's education remained confined to traditional lessons taught by governesses like Marion Crawford, her curriculum focused mainly on etiquette, music, and social graces. Skills deemed appropriate for a princess, but not a leader.
Margaret didn't have much of an education, and she had less and less of one as time went on because all the resources were concentrated on Elizabeth.
Margaret's friend and lady-in-waiting, Anne Glenconner, told people she always minded about not being educated as well as the Queen. The Queen had people from Eton and Cambridge, naturally, but Princess Margaret was never part of that. Margaret had a governess and was taught to play the piano and speak French. She was very well read and would have really enjoyed being educated.
Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, once remarked dismissively about education. "My sisters and I only had governesses, and we all married well." Margaret later resented this lack of intellectual stimulation, feeling it reinforced her secondary status.
The young Princess Margaret may not have envied the responsibility that came with being heir to the throne of England, but she was jealous of the fact that Elizabeth's status as future queen meant that she was given a better education. The two were tutored at home rather than sent to school, and both received a well-rounded education, but Elizabeth's was more rigorous.
Sibling dynamics further complicated matters, as Margaret's vivacious personality often clashed with Elizabeth's reserved demeanour. Known for her charm and wit, Margaret could also be willful and demanding. While Elizabeth dutifully embraced her responsibilities, Margaret struggled with feelings of exclusion and jealousy. On one occasion, Elizabeth confided to their governess that "Margaret always wants what I want," a sentiment echoed by palace staff who observed similar tensions as Margaret frequently sought attention and recognition that mirrored what her sister received. Despite this rivalry, Margaret adored Elizabeth, but found it difficult to reconcile her love with her growing resentment. And as they drew older, this disparity became more pronounced. During the Second World War, while Elizabeth began taking on public duties to prepare for her future role as Queen, Margaret remained in the background, too young to contribute meaningfully, but old enough to feel left out. Even within their family unit, subtle distinctions were made. Their father affectionately referred to Elizabeth as "my pride" and Margaret as "my joy," a statement that unintentionally underscored their differing destinies. For Margaret, it was a constant reminder that she would always be cherished, but never central. Decades later, history would repeat itself with the birth of Henry Charles Albert David, alias Prince Harry, on September 15th, 1984. Unlike Margaret, Harry was born directly into his destiny as a spare. His father, Prince Charles, the heir apparent, reportedly quipped after Harry's birth, "Now I have an heir and a spare. My work is done." While intended as light-hearted humour, this remark encapsulated Harry's role within the royal hierarchy from the very beginning. He grew up alongside his elder brother William in Kensington Palace and Highgrove House, under vastly different expectations. Whereas Harry's path was less defined, William was groomed meticulously for kingship. His education and upbringing was steeped in preparation for leadership. And although Harry attended elite schools like Eton College alongside William, there was an unspoken understanding that his role would always be secondary, to support rather than lead. Unlike Margaret's relatively private childhood in a pre-media era, Harry grew up under relentless public scrutiny. Every milestone, from his first steps to his school years, was documented by tabloids, eager to compare him to William. The media perpetuated the narrative that Harry was the mischievous younger brother, while William represented stability and responsibility. Likewise, within their family life, disparities were evident, as Harry later revealed that even the decoration of their childhood bedrooms at Balmoral Castle reflected their places in the royal hierarchy. Princess Diana recognised these dynamics early on and sought to shield Harry from feeling overshadowed by his brother. She took both boys to places like AIDS clinics and homeless shelters to expose them to life beyond palace walls and instill empathy, which was a departure from traditional royal parenting. Diana also affectionately called Harry "my good King Harry," expressing her belief in his potential beyond his designated role as William's backup. But despite her efforts, systemic inequalities shaped Harry's childhood in ways he could not escape. Within their family unit, it was subtle distinctions that reinforced their roles. William often accompanied Prince Charles on official engagements, while Harry remained in the background. The parallels between Margaret and Harry are striking despite the decades separating them. Both were born into immense privilege, but found themselves defined by what they were not: the heir. For Margaret, this meant growing up under the shadow of a sister destined for greatness. And as for Harry, it meant navigating life in an era where every misstep was amplified by global media. Margaret's isolation came from being sidelined within a tightly controlled royal environment, while Harry's came from being thrust into an unforgiving spotlight where his value seemed tied to William's destiny. Both would eventually experience moments of rebellion. Margaret, through her glamorous social life and defiance of royal expectations, and Harry, through his candidness about mental health and eventual decision to step back from royal duties. As their stories unfolded in different eras, one truth remained constant: being the spare came with emotional costs that neither could fully escape. Their paths were shaped by love for their families, but also by deep frustrations with roles they did not choose. And so, their stories continue. Rebels within institutions bound by tradition, yet yearning for individuality. What happens when those who are meant to support decide they want to lead? That is a tale for the next episode.